Welcome to 2026, and we are so excited to kick off this year here at Final Weapon with a major discussion talking about our 2025 Game of the Year, Death Stranding 2. As you may know, or if you don't, Final Weapon is a media outlet, and we have plenty of staff who all collectively vote together on one game to win Game of the Year. This past year now, which is weird to say, of course, it was Death Stranding 2, Hideo Kojima's latest that released for PlayStation 5 on June 26, 2025. I'm here with Payne today, and we have a lot to talk about just to gush and really dive into what makes this game so special. Payne, I know you at least didn't necessarily participate in our voting because you hadn't beaten the game yet, but you just rolled credits last night. What'd you think?
It's just simply amazing because Death Stranding 1, I didn't play at launch. I got it launch year, but I played like the start, heard some like the more contentious opinions of the game. And I'm sure like many of you possibly have even tried the game. Like I even have just that one buddy who's like, "Oh, that game that plays music while you walk around." And it's just one of those games, which is something Kojima himself wanted to craft. Even going to the lengths of changing aspects of Death Stranding 2 from his original plan. And, dude, it was like last year that I finally decided I needed to buckle down and beat Death Stranding 1. And, I was a bit worried, just because open world games can be kind of hit or miss, and just, the 2 or 3 years of hearing people kind of complain about the game. But you know what happens when you faithfully engage with mechanics and open your mind to new ideas and expression? You find what I considered one of my top 5 video games of all time. So that's some big shoes to fill for Death Stranding 2, and I honestly think they need a bigger shoe size to fit Death Stranding 2. Like, this is how you do a video game sequel, in my opinion. People, saying Tears of the Kingdom, its rightful praises. And I'm honestly wondering where's some of the fanfare for Death Stranding 2?
I know. I mean, it was kind of crazy. It got no award wins whatsoever at the Game Awards, and I found that kind of ridiculous personally. I was a huge Death Stranding fan from day one. I pre-ordered the life-size baby, so I have a BB sitting on my shelf that creepily stares in the background of any camera I'm on. And I got the collector's edition for DS2. I was so excited. My most anticipated game behind Final Fantasy VII Rebirth at the time. And I was just ecstatic for this game, considering how incredible the first one was. And Kojima delivered. And it's one of those things where I definitely think this is a game that will be looked back upon in 10 years as something much more appreciated than it was today. And that's not to say that this wasn't appreciated. I mean, it got great scores overall. I know there was a lot of people that got to try it out for the first time and really fell in love with the technical systems and the beautiful story that Kojima crafted. But at the end of the day, I definitely do think that there was a lot more praise to be sung for this one. And I truly believe, I said this in my review that I spent forever writing. I'm not sure that Kojima will make a better game than this after Death Stranding 2. I'm not. I mean, it is everything that you would ever want from a video game from Hideo Kojima. And it just felt like finally, for the first time in his career, a game that was fully him and fully realized with his vision. There were no constraints from Konami. It felt like the game that he's wanted to make since 2015, and it was finally realized this year. And I'm just so happy I got to experience it. I'm so happy that he was able to make it. And it's one of those things that, I'm just really glad we were able to get Death Stranding and Death Stranding 2. Two for me as well, I consider them a duology. It's really hard to pick one over the other. I'd say Death Stranding 2 is a better game than 1, but I do think that I have such an attachment to 1 as well. I coupled them together. I mean, together they're one of my top 5 games ever. I love Death Stranding to death. I love Metal Gear. I love the work of Hideo Kojima, but there was just something special about Death Stranding 2 and the way it resonated with me after beating it this June. I mean, it was a grind all-out marathon. I feel like I just never stopped playing.
Like, yeah, dude, I had it bought day one, but just, life's crazy, full-time jobs and everything. So it can take a while to get to some stuff, but I'm so glad that I finally decided to chug it as like the last game that I truly immerse myself in within 2025. And I'd I'd really only played like some other remasters and stuff this year, and there were some other games that caught my attention, and I felt bad that Death Stranding 2 fell to the wayside, especially with how much I love the first one. And really, just after Friends, Noah, and just seeing how in general people were more positive on it, I just had to finally take that, step and beat it. Because I'm not gonna go and say something's like my game of the year if I didn't actually put the work in. And oh man, like it was dumb of me to put it off so long. I should have just chipped away at it, like literally doing 5-minute deliveries for like 100 days in a row. I,
You
I
should
should
have.
I should have
You
done
have
that.
over 100 hours like me.
But just the thing is, there's a lot of DNA of Death Stranding 1. This is still clearly a sequel, and I agree with Noah. To me, this is like a duology. Not companion pieces per se, but it just feels like you set down another puzzle piece that just snugly fit. It's simply amazing how well like new concepts are introduced, or you realize that they're expanding upon these ideas from the first game, and even picking up loose threads that you would forget about, which we'll we'll mention a couple later possibly, but really, just man, everything in this game is exactly what a big budget sequel should be for a game. Like, because honestly, I don't think there's any way you could have done this unless you gave specifically Hideo Kojima a lot of good talent and some money.
Yeah, the money part especially. But yeah, I mean, it just breathes his DNA. It's just such a unique creation, and it's just so obviously original. And when we vote for game of the year, like when I'm writing a review and I'm reviewing a game, on our review scale, when we consider a 5 out of 5 or a masterpiece of a game, almost said perfect, no game's perfect, but a masterpiece of a game, you consider things, for us at least at Final Weapon, of a masterpiece is a game that pushes the medium and the genre forward, and it innovates within its space. And I feel like that this is a game that truthfully innovated upon its predecessor and pushed the medium forward as a whole in so many areas. I mean, you could look at just technically what it was able to do. I mean, the stuff it did there was unbelievable. And then you talk about all the animations, the performance, just everything, the music, the story, the writing, all of this stuff comes together, the depth of gameplay systems, and it just brings together what is our game of the year. And I played a lot of games this year, over 25 or so, what I was able to for reviews and everything. And I didn't have anything that really came close to Death Stranding 2. Donkey Kong Bonanza was great. I loved it. Felt that the bosses were a little too easy. I'm a hardcore Donkey Kong fan, big 3D platformer guy, but I loved it to death. It was an amazing game. But with Death Stranding 2, it just felt like it was a game that truly pushed the video game medium forward and blended the lines of what a video game can and could be. And I think that that's the kind of talent, that's the kind of product that we should be rewarding and celebrating in the industry, because it's not often that we see games like that that really challenge the medium and push it forward. And it's just something that Death Stranding 2 was able to do with, I mean, it almost felt like ease. It was just a clear plan from the beginning of how this game went. I never felt like it detracted from itself. It was just from beginning to end. Obviously, the creative vision was locked in at 100% from Kojima and his team. And it's a beautiful work of art. It really is.
Like, especially when you kind of put it that way, I'd say that really is part of the X factor for me for Death Stranding 2. You can play countless games and see, or at least detect, maybe a compromise, or like, oh, maybe this had to be changed because something didn't work, or executives, yada yada, where it feels like, at the end of the day, you are engaging with a product. on occasion. I mean, these are video games after all. But this feels like one of the first games I've played in a long time where it feels like nothing was compromised. Like a perfectly clear artistic vision was, like you said, locked in and executed upon. Like they knew what they wanted to improve, they knew where they wanted to go, and it just feels it. I'd honestly, like I said this to Noah while doing this final stretch of Death Stranding 2, I just messaged him and I'm like, I drew the comparison to Tears of the Kingdom a little earlier. I honestly think in terms of video game sequels, I do think Death Stranding 2 does, like, in many respects, surpass what that did for, like, sequels and even open world design. I just think they tackle two. I wouldn't call Death Stranding 2 a sandbox like the new Zelda, but it feels like more like a simulation, if that makes sense, because of all of the mechanics. Because on top of just the depth of moving Sam around, the changes and additions to vehicles alter that, the way the new highways work, and just how much bigger and more expansive the game is. Everything goes in every direction, and it just feels like you're being given something brand new, like almost every main order and even most side orders. You're getting small little upgrades, you're getting new ways to engage with the world, you're getting new details about this wonderful science fiction universe. It, it's just hard to find even an open world game these days, because honestly, I've heard little to no fanfare about the open world gameplay of something like Assassin's Creed Shadows. But Death Stranding 1 already had such a unique perspective on how to portray an open world game and how to interact with it. And it just feels like while Death Stranding was executing on at least an 8 on its ideas, because it felt like there's room to explore some more. It feels like Death Stranding immediately jumps up to an 11. Like they just go past 10.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree, and with your point to being the open world design, one of the biggest complaints I remember seeing from people who played the game was that it was too easy and that, oh, you get the vehicles early this time and like I just used the vehicle. And I think that's the thing that people aren't recognizing that is actually great game design is that I feel that Kojima purposely implemented those vehicles as a direct response to feedback from the first game to where you get the trucks, you get the trikes very early on. Later on, you get the coffin board. I mean, there's so many ways to move around the monorail, the highway, all this stuff. But the beauty of it is that you have the choice of playing how you want to play. He's putting that choice in your hands. And so instead of having to say, okay, you're going up this mountain, you have to use stakes and you have to use zip lines and you have to go up the whole traditional way like you did in the first game. Now, obviously, you have allies with you. You're able to get stuff earlier and you're able to approach it however you want. I joke all the time about, people and being able to play quote unquote truck stranding in DS2 because you can basically, the joke is you get a truck pretty early on and you can drive that truck literally anywhere and you could beat the entire game without doing anything but driving the truck. If you really wanted to, you could. However, for people who really love the gameplay, you really get to experiment with things. You can go stealthily. The action combat was completely revamped. Guns actually work as guns now. You don't have to worry about killing people. I mean, there's so much there that is just player choice and freedom. And I feel like that really goes unrecognized. And that's something I really appreciated from a gameplay design standpoint because I found myself on different missions being like, man, I really want to take in this scenery. This is a cool place. So I walked on foot. Some missions I was having to navigate around an enemy base, so I had to prepare for that. So I would say, okay, I'm going to take a vehicle here, get off, get around the enemy base, and then I'm going to deploy a coffin board or something. You have a lot of options to determine how you navigate through Australia. And it's such a diverse environment. You still have the mountains, you still have the similar areas that you did to America, but it's a lot more diverse as a biome than America was. And I really appreciated that you basically got the ability to just choose how you play. And I don't think a lot of games beyond really, like we talked about, Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, and a few others really let you do that.
It's quite absurd because, I mentioned how it's a bit more simulation-y. Because you have to like do things like manage materials, and like you said, there's so many different ways you can tackle a situation. And I joked with Death Stranding 1 after I beat it that it was Metal Gear Solid 6. But to me, this truly is like the true successor to Metal Gear Solid, honestly. Especially with where like the direction 5 was going. I feel like Kojima's actually managed to fully achieve what he sought out to do like over 10 years ago now.
No, I mean this game is so Metal Gear Solid coded. I think a large part of that is the fact that the Metal Gear Solid 5 action director actually moved on to DS2. And so the encounters and the ability to stealthily move around against enemies and navigate through that, so much of it, and as well as the open mission design, was really adapted from the idea behind MGS5. And I completely agree. It really does feel like that was fully realized here into a product that just screams, go do what you want. You know, like you can do whatever you want. We don't care. There's so much content, and I love that you called out the fact that you get something new like every time, because you really do. And even a lot of the side missions, you just get new stuff. I mean, I felt like it wasn't until about 90 hours that I stopped getting new things in the game. I mean, I probably still have more stuff to get. You know, I've kind of took a step away from the platinum because I played so much of it and I didn't have time with all my reviews. But, you know, as I go back and play every now and then for a few hours at a time, I feel like I'm always finding new stuff that I didn't even know about. Like, I got a scene last time I played a couple weeks ago, or actually, no, I played on Christmas. And maybe you knew this, maybe you don't. If you play on Christmas, all of the NPCs outside at the preppers and stuff, they'll all have Christmas tree holograms and Christmas hats.
Yeah,
Did you
and
know
they'll
that?
even wish you like
Yeah.
happy holidays, and
Yep.
you can click Sam's like shout button, and he'll like shout it back.
Happy holidays. Yeah, bro.
Like
I
I
mean, and
can't
it's
wait to
crazy
log
because
in
it's
on my
like,
birthday.
gosh,
Like I saw some of the teaser stuff for that, and like
yeah,
man, just that the
it's
little
cool.
personal touches too. It does make it feel like a little more communal when you get these elements.
It does. And I feel like it's like we had these in DS1, but they were different. I mean, they were different, and that was a different game. I mean, the beauty of it is it's like Death Stranding 1 was it was an isolated journey where you were alone, and it was you trying to Sam was taking this leap of faith, going to reconnect America as an isolationist, and he had no one with him, no humans with him. He was just him, and he did it by himself. And remember, at the beginning of the game, he had amphiphosphobia, which is where he had like skin reactions of redness when people touched him because of, you know, he just wasn't connected. And by the end of the game, you know, he was there with people and touching people and stuff, and he was able to. And I think it's like you look at the beginning of Death Stranding 2, he's with Lou and all these people aboard the DHV Magellan as kind of this base. Slowly across the game, more and more people come into Sam's life as connected, and you grow this party, and together this journey is so much different than America in DS1 because you have all these people helping you along the way, and it's a reminder that like you're not alone. And especially for the theme of the story being, you know, coming to terms and overcoming grief, obviously Sam having lost Lou at the very opening moments of the game. I mean, it's very just it's very resonating to watch the story and the way the characters interact and the way this journey unfolds compared to the first one, because, you know, you're connected with everyone, they're there to help you, and that really is experienced through the gameplay.
And this is also just such a Kojima sequel through and through. Like it even goes down to, you know, how like Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 have some like similar skeletons in their structure. Like all the bones are there, and then it's like the context and everything else that changes what in some ways is the same core experience. I think Death Stranding 2 does much of the same thing, especially with how it kind of puts like a twist on its themes. Like there's the symbolism behind Drawbridge. You know, the first game was about connecting people, but they also bring up topics like, well, sometimes bonds get severed too. And it's about reconnecting and being able to pick back up.
Absolutely. I mean, and there's so much symbolism throughout the game and just the themes explored. Like, I love the idea that Kojima questioned in the trailers of like, should we have connected? And I know, you might argue, well, that's not necessarily fully explored in the game, but I think it is in a way because he shows you, like, you pose the question, should we have connected? And as you play the game, you understand why you connected and the benefits of that. And it just, there's so many great themes and symbolism elements that are thrown into this. I mean, a lot of commentary on issues like artificial intelligence and stuff like that too. And it's really fascinating to watch it all come together because, I feel like you could give me a list of all these. I mean, there's got to be at least like 10 or 12 themes and messages that are littered through this game. And if you were to give me that list, I'd be like, how are you going to connect all this? But it just works. It just works,
And it also just continues the first game and pushes forward. Like, honestly, I feel like there'd be very little issue if someone playing these like back to back. Like watching a season 1 and season 2 of a show. I think the way it also continues the themes of like continuing on, pressing forward and trying to establish a legacy and fighting for your life with everything you've got. Like just the preservationist stuff and the humanitarian stuff, like, bro, it's all continued. And it's also just amazing to see. I feel like the preppers this time around also kind of push and explore these themes a bit better than they did in the first game even.
Agreed.
Because you really understand. I also feel like that has to do with, in the first game you drop off a delivery and you pretty much get like that line of dialogue. I could be misremembering because I don't think it's in the first game, but this go around you have like your full like option wheel and you can really poke and prod different NPCs to get more information, not only about, the rewards like gear that they give you, but also like rumors and just aspects of the story.
There's a lot there, and I think that world building with the attention to detail on NPCs further pushing and expanding upon the themes we see in the main story does a lot to really just further pull you into the world. I mean, Kojima did have kind of a big task doing this, considering that we spent the whole time going through America, and now we're going to Mexico and Australia. And I do really think he did a great job of bringing back some of the preppers from the first game and bringing them in, and they were back in a way, right? And I think that was cool to see them, we're in Australia helping research to help the continent. I mean, it was very interesting to see the way that he interwove that to bringing those familiar faces in.
And like, dude, it was like honestly
it's so rewarding.
Really touching, like especially towards like the end when you meet Igor again, or was it his brother? It's one of those two brothers, and you meet him again, and he's like, yeah, like I came on the forward team to like get everything set up for you to establish the chiral network, and he's like, it's because of the stuff you did in the first game, you inspired me. And you get just these little connections from the first game as well that carry on, and it does make it feel like you made a difference, especially if you've also played the first game.
Definitely.
Or even the little nod, like, dude, the otter hat, if you manage to get to the inventor, he's like, here's the otter hat, and he's just like shocked that someone else invented it because it's an item from the first game as well.
Right. Conan.
Yeah, sadly, he doesn't have as big of a brain as Conan. He beat him by like a year in universe.
True that. Yeah, I will say, like, my favorite thing about the preppers is, like, we had this in the first game, but I think I noticed it more in this one. Like, it was really funny with all of the, there's 4 Fort Knots, like northeast, south, and west, and all of the characters at those locations are like nods at the direction. So like West Fort Knot was like Olivia Westbury, which I thought was really funny. And then you just had a couple more of the different Fort Knots. And
it was just it's like the dude at Terminal Fort Knot is called James Ender or something.
Yes.
Because he's the last guy.
Right. No, it's funny. And I really liked, like, I know that you definitely, we talked about this a little bit, and I think you definitely have a lot to say here, but like the way that he incorporated people, like he brings in Gen Hoshino, right? Very famous Japanese musician, and he is like great singer, fan of his songs, fan of his work, And it's so funny the way that he interweaves him into a way that actually makes sense in the story. And then you have like Usada Pecora, who's a VTuber,
I know,
right, as a
dude.
data
It's so
scientist. I mean,
funny how they
it's
do that
crazy.
stuff. They have these actual, figures that you can recognize just smoothly integrated while also somewhat advertising themselves. But dude, I was losing it how, you know, Gen over here is like, yeah, check out my music. I really hope you like it. Like, just really enjoy it. And then he's like, yeah,
Yeah.
but I also have like shotgun blueprints because, it's a dangerous out here, man. And he's like giving you a shotgun. Or then Pecora's like, yeah, I'm developing technology like these mines that shoot under the ground so that they're harder to dodge and detect. And like, man, that's also what I mean about the just giving you new stuff constantly. And then it's just smoothly integrated into the world and universe like that. It's funny and makes sense and feels like a reward. It's just this game is constantly doing that to you.
Yeah, there's no shortage of new stuff whatsoever, and it always feels like that there's stuff to give, beyond the traditional main story. Like you do some side stuff, you get side stuff, you encounter some random stuff in the environment, you might find some random things to do. I mean, there's no shortage of content, and you have to appreciate that so much because it doesn't feel forced at all. It really reminds me of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in a way, to where there's so much content, it's not forced, but you literally just have this treasure trove of stuff to do, and it's just sitting there waiting for you.
Because that's also some of the beauty of the design we were touching on. Because really, you can just discover your playstyle and stick with it. Or you can just keep trying new things if you want and figure out new combinations. Because really, there's just so many different variables, like from like the weather, the different BT types, the ghost mechs, and just different terrain things, along with trying to get stuff built and refinished. Like, there's so much to engage with, and you can really decide. Because, like, in the first game, there was just a point where I gave up on rebuilding the highway and just spent most of that game hot-footing it everywhere. I just grabbed a power skeleton so I could carry as much as possible and just was patient and walked everywhere in Death Stranding 1. Unless I had a bike. Those were
No, that's
useful,
fair.
except for the mountains. But this time around, I really spent a lot of time building up the highway and monorails. And I'll admit, it did become truck stranding for like 80% of the game for me.
Dang. Nah, I definitely played some Truck Stranding for the side missions, and the mountain missions. I climbed up the mountain the first time and got to the
Yes.
one of the peak areas, and I was like, all right, give me the truck. Whenever
Dude.
the funniest mission is when you have to save the guy's dad,
Oh
and
yeah, dude.
you keep saving him, you save him, and then the funniest part about this whole thing is like you go through this whole effort to save him. When I did this, I went via truck to go get him, and I actually crashed my truck, and it flipped and spun all across, went down the whole mountain, lost it. So I carried him back by hand, and you bring him back, and you put him on the stretcher, and he like jolts up, gives you the thumbs up, and leaves. It's like the thumbs up thing is just so funny, man.
Oh, dude, like the adventure is hilarious. And I feel like the preppers have a lot more personality this time around, and there's just, in general, a lot more writing. There's a lot to appreciate in just the small things. And especially, like, if we're talking about, like, a character having a lot of writing, I gotta talk about probably, if not my favorite, definitely one of my favorite characters, Dahlman.
The goat, man, so underappreciated.
I'm like, I'm genuinely shocked that I haven't heard more people gushing over Dahlman. He should have like some huge fan clubs and stuff online, if I'm being honest. I think so much of his
Dude,
dialogue is like charming, witty, informative, and just plain entertaining, and he has such a good voice too.
yeah, no, it's great. I'll be honest. I was personally really upset that we got Magellan Man instead of a life-size doll man statue in the collector's edition. But
Dude,
when it's all said
that
and
would have
done,
been
I'm very
so
happy.
awesome. Like actually sit him on your shelf and stuff, just like Sam. Man.
It's got to be coming, man. It's the easiest merchandise Kojima's ever made. It's got to be coming. I mean, I love. Don't get me wrong. I'm all good with Magellan Man after getting it. It's one of the coolest statues I own. It's right next to Sephiroth. It's awesome. Love it. But yeah, I really want that Doll Man. But he's just such a great character. It's so cool how he's animated at a different frame rate than the rest of the cast to give it this stylistic look. And it's really hard to do buddy characters that are not annoying in games. But I just felt Dollman was so well done, and he was so humorous and such a heartbreaking backstory, which I feel like is true for every character in Death Stranding.
Yeah.
But Dollman's story, I mean, it was so crazy, man.
And God, one of my favorite line deliveries of his is if you shower, go back into the room and talk to him. He just goes, "Woo, looking clean as a whistle." And it just gets me every time. And I love the commentary on if you eat some like cryptobiotes or like an apple in front of him. He just sits there like, I really miss the taste of food. And
Yeah,
you're
man,
right about
'cause
the
you can't eat.
companion character thing. It's usually so hard, especially having everything in this game's voice acted. It usually is really hard to have, especially a talking companion character. But I think Kojima discovered a really happy medium with it, because unless there's actually some like story thing where the camera is kind of pointing you towards something, you're not going to really hear him talk and interrupt your journey. Plus, you can use him as a pretty handy tool. You can like throw him up in the
Yeah.
air and like see through his eyes. Because honestly, like, who wants to waste a PCC to build a watchtower every time? Or what if you're off the network? Like, no. My PCCs are to build the generators because I need like at least one or two of them every big haul because I have a truck.
My PCC is a PDD, a portable Dollman device.
And I think that's kind of what threads the needle on making him not annoying. And that's also, he has like a lot of story relevance because every one of these characters just has so many unique things about them that draw you into them as a character. And then they're also there for your journey and support you in various ways. There's fun things with Rainy, like you get to pop in on her like making tests and stuff for tomorrow. You can play with the Polaroid camera, which is honestly really fun, and I love the small detail of Sam like pinning them next to his bedside. And they honestly do some really cool details with like just photographs and other stuff in general in this game.
Yeah.
Like things you wouldn't even expect in terms of presentation or callbacks.
Definitely. I was, speaking of Rainy, like just another great character. I was so impressed with the ability of the writing to really compel you to care for these characters. And it's like, you think about how, I mean, look, from the outside and from the inside too, Death Stranding is a weird world, like a weird world. There's so much going on, and there's so many different concepts and just things, natural occurrences that happen there, like time fall, this or that. And just the way that Kojima found a way to incorporate all of that into all of the characters in different ways is just fascinating. I mean, Dollman is a character who, the concept of the body and the soul, the ha and the ka. Dollman is a character who his soul is trapped in a doll. Rainy is a character who, for whatever reason, wherever she goes, rain follows, but it's not timefall rain. It's actually regenerative rain. And, we see that right from the beginning in this beautiful sequence when we first see her, where she's dancing around in the rain and she picks up one of her birds that fell into the timefall and it heals under her rain. It's a super crazy natural occurrence, but it's perfectly in line with the lore. I mean, the list goes on. You've got Tomorrow, who has powers connected to the beach. You've got Tarman, who lost his arm to the tar and to the BTs. I mean, it just goes on. And then even Sam is a character who, the concept of Doom's level was something introduced in the first game that basically gave a kind of a rating for how connected someone was and what their abilities were to the beach, and just the overall, weirdness is what I'd say of Death Stranding. But there's even, after the events of the first game, Sam actually had his Doom's level raised, and so there were certain things that he could do, being CBTs now, without the need of a bridge baby. So there's just so much that's connected with all these different characters that is all in line with the lore. And you really have to appreciate that as a fan, because it's not like you have a bunch of characters who are all the same. Everyone's so different, dealing with their own problems, and they're all tied together to this world and to the natural occurrences we see within it.
It's it's such a natural sequel, because that's where something like Tears of the Kingdom and a lot of video game sequels in general fall apart a little on, unless they're kind of conceived at the same time. And I just genuinely think Kojima had so much of Death Stranding's world and themes already planned out, or at least having some kind of concept. I think he was so deep into this creation of his, and that's how he managed to achieve a sequel of this caliber. Because there's movies that can't recapture the magic and improve on their original. And of course, there's tons of games that manage to not achieve that as well. And this really, it really just feels fleshed out. And man, like all the extra writing and story, it's just natural. It's like you never left, truly. Which something like Tears of the Kingdom, it feels different because of like the writing. And I think this being like a direct sequel to such a highly story-based game, and it being able to not, pick up like in a different place with a different main character, like a Ghost of Yote or something else, is honestly really awesome, because it starts building up these mysteries and making you want answers to questions you didn't know you even had from the first game.
I agree. I mean, I think that's one of the things that DS2 does so well. You know, I was really satisfied with Death Stranding as a story, right? There was we're gonna talk about it here because we're now. It's been a long time. If you haven't played it, skip 10 seconds. But like the whole story of Death Stranding being this journey connecting across America to find Amelie, the twists that happen, and then Sam finding connection with his BB and ultimately being able to save BB at the end is just a beautiful story. It's fully told, and it felt like that. Yes, that chapter had closed at the time. What would Kojima do next? And then DS2 was revealed, and it's like it truly does feel that this was always written as the second chapter, and he always had this in mind, because everything here builds on stuff that we didn't even think about. I mean, take Lucy, for example, a character in Death Stranding 2, who is Sam's significant other. She was mentioned in Death Stranding 1 in like one of the archives, right? Lucy Strand is what was said. But as you know, in that picture with him and Bridget, we never saw her face, and it was this mystery, and no one could have put the pieces together that she was going to be a character that played into Death Stranding 2, but she did, and it felt like she always like should have been here, and this was something that had to be told. And that is the mark of a great storyteller. The ability to take these threads and stuff that we never even thought about and connect it to make it feel so natural, like this was always the plan. Because it probably was.
I wonder if it could have been something as simple as like, oh, he just didn't have like an actress picked out or something.
I think that might be the case. Because I actually do know in the data mine for Death Stranding 1, I guess we're calling it now, there's actually I've seen online like a decrypted, there's a file, like an asset that shows that image, and she looks different, but like it's without her covered face. She looks different, like it's not her. So it was clearly a placeholder for Kojima, I feel like, because it was changed in the second game to update to Lucy. Alyssa, I'm forgetting her last name, but the actress who now plays Lucy.
Yeah, and dude, that was like such a smooth like thing. It honestly like threw me for a loop, because I just honestly didn't expect that level of interweaving. Like I expected like a continuation, and one of my biggest worries was with Death Stranding 2 before I even played it at launch, was I was a little worried that it would feel a little more like of a tacked on sequel, but it just really, it feels like Kojima could have announced, back when the first game was announced, he could have said that he could have done a James Cameron, and I could believe that would have been like a thing, how he, had Avatar and all that completely written and had to wait for technology to get where he
Agreed.
wanted. Like it legitimately feels like Death Stranding 2 could have been something like that.
I totally agree. I mean, it really does feel like part one and part two. And that's why when we said earlier, like, that we both kind of refer and view this as a duology, because it really does feel like that. It's chapter two of the story. And, you know, I personally, I think it wraps up Sam's story beautifully. But obviously, Kojima's already talked about Death Stranding 3. He claims he's not going to make it. That just saddens me so much. Like, it needs to be made. It truly needs to be made. I'm sorry. Especially after the teases at the end, it has to be made.
Yeah, I really do think Sam's journey, like, is mostly over. I think we'll at least see or get some reference to him just because of what, like, the important figure he is in the universe. Because honestly, it'd be sick if, like, the Death Stranding live action movie comes out. Norman Reedus already said he would reprise his role if offered. And, like, even if Sam wasn't the main character, that it'd be cool to actually see Norman Reedus in, like, the actual Porter get up in live action for even, like, an Easter egg.
I want to see it so bad, man. I want to see it so bad.
But really, I think we could get a Death Stranding 3, and I believe it could play beautifully, like, thematically with how 1 and 2 ended up. Because we're on the cusp of Death Stranding becoming a multimedia franchise. And I'm so glad that both 1 and 2 came out. And that's almost part of what makes it feel like they were at least mostly conceived with each other. Because even if, like, some of the details of a possible sequel weren't hammered down, you and I both know Kojima was toying with the idea of a sequel as he was making the first one. There's just no way he could have that smoothly integrated it.
No. Well, I mean,
It's also
okay,
the clear
do
vision.
believe,
It's that clear vision.
yeah, it's the vision for sure. I do believe even if he didn't, he would have found a way to integrate it. But I do think, obviously, he definitely was thinking about the sequel, considering what we saw at the end of DS2.
Yeah.
Considering what we saw, he definitely was thinking ahead. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like, I don't think, you know, when I played Death Stranding, I loved it to death. I don't think I ever imagined that it would get to the point where we are now, where we have 2 games, a third one potentially teased. We have a movie live action coming out. We have 2 animes. I mean, it's crazy. And there's novelizations. It has spawned into a massive franchise for Kojima Productions, and I'm incredibly happy about that. And I think that idea of this growing to such proportions that it has really hones in, especially with the theme of Death Stranding 2. And that's stuff that, you know, we touched on a bit earlier, but when I look at this game as a whole, and I look at the themes, and I look at what it was trying to say, you know, the big key message about grief that Kojima tries to tell throughout the story, it boils down with one phrase that they say, and it's "death can't tear us apart." And it's really highlighted throughout the whole journey of grief that you go on across Australia as Sam, and coming to terms with the fact that you lost your daughter. And it's beautifully laid out, but more importantly, it does to me feel in a way personal for Kojima, in the sense that I do feel that this is his self-reflection on the fact that his career is not infinite, and he is now in his 60s, and, you know, there's no telling how many more games Kojima is going to be able to make, right? It's a matter of life. And I think that this was just a beautiful reflection on the fact that no matter what happens or when, like, Kojima through Death Stranding 2 was writing that his work will live on beyond him. And I think that that's just a great thing, and it's a great message for people, even, you know, just looking objectively with Death Can't Tear Us Apart. You know, people will always live on through other people and through memories and through stories regardless, and, you know, they'll always be with you, journeying with you. And I think that message alone was really what tied this game together for me with everything else. I mean, the story was amazing, the music, everything, but it was really that message that just, it was interweaved through every piece of this game that really tied the bow and made this so special.
And man, that's another, like, facet of why I also believe this is Kojima's magnum opus. Yeah, in interviews he insists that it's always his most recent video game that's his magnum opus. But honestly, while I think OD and Fizzant will be some crazy, amazing games, and some of Kojima's best more than likely, I still, much like you, am reticent to say that they're going to surpass Death Stranding 2. Because Fizzant, we've already been told that it's going to be like the spiritual successor to Metal Gear Solid, more or less. The tactical espionage action, it's coming back. And that inherently, to me, is more video gamey in some ways than Death Stranding. Death Stranding is honestly a once-in-a-lifetime idea that only a man like Hideo Kojima could have ever conceived and brought to the world. Like, just every facet of it is just so finely tuned to his taste and what he holds important. And it's amazing seeing these themes honestly be something that he's carried with him his whole career. Because you can go back and see the themes of, like genes and then memes and legacy in the original Metal Gear Solid games. And what's interesting is I feel like Death Stranding as a series, and especially 2, has been Kojima taking these ideas and being more spiritual and esoteric with it. And I think you're really kind of hitting the nail on the head here with it is him on some level grappling with mortality and kind of offering his 2 cents yet again, but in a more soulful way. Much like the Han the COD, say Metal Gear Solid is like the body of Kojima's work. But I think Death Stranding is the soul of Kojima's entire catalog.
That's a great way to put it. No, I agree completely. And I definitely think, it's interesting. I've thought a lot about that. That was kind of my takeaway after having beat the game and really just diving in. But I think it's funny because you look at all these interviews he's done recently and he's talked a lot about mortality. And so I really do think that this was his answer to that of, just understanding that, mortality is a thing.
And honestly, that's just something that I think we've been seeing really like have a ripple effect through many creative industries. And I think it's great that Kojima's being upfront about his plans about it and sharing his feelings on the topic in such an artful way through this very medium that he's helped really craft and give texture that no one else has in the history of video games as a medium yet. And Kojima Productions will persist without Kojima. I think Death Stranding 3 probably will come out. I'm not sure what form, and I really only see Kojima in some type of supervisor or producer role for it. And I think that'd be perfectly thematic for Death Stranding 3 or continuation.
Yeah. No, I agree. But he could also lie and claim, like he did with MGS, that there's not going to be a sequel.
Yeah, because honestly, like at this point, also expect the next Smash to still be developed by Sakurai.
That was part of that deal. He got Air Riders, now they get Smash. But, they're, it's one of those things with DS2 that I'm just glad we got this game, And I mean, we've hit on a lot here. I definitely, one of the other things for me, I know that we haven't talked much about is the music and just the way where we talk about how this game feels so personal for Kojima. This time he actually added in like a MP3 player basically, and you can make your own playlists and play them as you walk around the world with all the different music you collect.
Dude, the sound mixing is so perfect for that type of thing. Because I feel like a lot of games that have like a music player-esque thing just kind of, slap the MP3 or WAV file or whatever over everything else. But this, it has like such a perfect balance and sound envelope where you still hear other things, but it's kind of like drowned out almost like you're actually wearing earbuds, even if you're like just playing from the TV speaker. It's just really wonderfully done. And man, just the music. I was doing some interview reading, and apparently like the soundtrack is like so reactive that if you hopped on Apple Music or Spotify right now and listened to some of these soundtracks or just bought it, you're getting these very specific cuts that include like all the parts of every song.
Yep.
But like when you really read in depth about how they crafted just the normal soundtrack, this isn't even including the wonderful selection of vocal songs, new and old. the soundtrack is so dynamic that Woodkid pretty much literally moved to Tokyo to spend 3+ years working on hundreds of hours of music that can just interweave with each other.
It is one of the most impressive implementations of music I've ever seen in a game. And I honestly, like, there's so many, when people talk about, oh, Death Stranding didn't win this or that, music's the real big one that I really wish it would have won music, because that's the one area, and that was with the first game too, which it did win. But like Woodkid, from the opening moments of Death Stranding 2, you have -61 playing, you've got the fragile monologue, you go out and Sam and Lou are sitting there with this just insanely realistic looking vista, like unlike anything I've ever seen in a game, realism wise. And you hear -61 playing, but it's just the vocal tones of the humming. And the second you start running on the hill, the drums come in, the percussion does, and it's and you hear that it dynamically shapes as you walk and as you move. But if you go off the path, the percussion goes away and you actually lose the vocals and it starts to go into strings. You go back up, you start to hear the vocals. Once you're on the path, you hear the percussion. You stop, you just hear the vocals. I mean, it's that attention to detail like that. It's like, I've never seen anything like this on this scale for every track in the game, almost. Like, I mean, I can't even count the number of implementations like this, because Woodkid did about I think it was 12 to 16 tracks for DS2. And then Ludwig Forsell, who composed the first game, came back for this one, had some incredible composition. He's also got plenty of dynamic sound layering, and it's just crazy to me of how they implemented this in a way where it just perfectly interweaves. And you don't appreciate that when you listen to the soundtrack as a whole. I mean, I've got the Woodkid album on vinyl. It's a beautiful listen. So many great songs. I mean, oh my God. Same with the Death Stranding 2 original soundtrack by Ludwig. And we interviewed Ludwig earlier this year and actually talked about Death Stranding 2 as a whole, his, compositions and how that went about. And we really dove into the way that he composed for this game. And I remember it was so incredible to hear about how in depth he went just for composing with all kinds of instruments that are not traditionally used. And I loved just everything about this musically. And I mean, yeah, man, it's truly a treat, just the way that everything comes together like that. And
it's not even
I could call out so
like
many
the
tracks.
needle drops are like, it actually got me emotional. Like sadly low roar, like the main vocal composer who did things like, don't like Not So Serious
Ryan.
and all that amazing music that really defined Death Stranding 1's tone. Like, he sadly passed away before this game could come out, so we get a lot of posthumous tracks and stuff from him. And it honestly just ties into the themes of the game even more, just because of the way Low Roar's voice is. You get just those deep kind of melancholic tones, just like the first game. And it's sad knowing that such an amazing creative who helped define one of my favorite games of all time isn't with us anymore.
No, it's really sad. And one of those things, Kojima just put those in the most perfect moments. I in my interview with Ludwig, I asked him about that, about specifically the needle drops and the placements, and he's like, oh, that's all Hideo. And he's like, Hideo, it's been hours working on that and just perfectly timing it at the right point and selecting the music and all of that. And it's just the amount of thought that went into exactly where these tracks would go in is just amazing.
Like,
and
dude,
yeah, I mean,
you can read like Kojima's
album,
like
man.
another Kojima interview, and he's like, he does all of like the final like playthrough stuff before they're about to go gold to just fine tune everything personally. And I don't know if I've really heard that many game directors talk about going in that deep with certain things. And with what you said about Ludwig just being like, oh yeah, he picks all the needle drops and does all that. And it's just insane, like, the attention to detail Kojima has on pacing, like, this open world and story and knowing when to have these needle drops. And there's so many in this game, man. It feels like any time the story is heating up or you're getting interesting developments or going to like new areas with crazy things going on, like you start really getting into the feeling of like loneliness, but then it feels like you're not alone when one of these songs plays, and it just gives you the strength to go on.
Definitely. I mean, one of my favorite stories with those is the on the I think it's On the Beach is what it's called. The song that plays as you're arriving at the plate gate in Mexico. And it's just this super coolly mixed song. And I remember the artist Caroline, she actually said in an interview that Kojima had said they had connected, and this was after all of the selections were already made, but he like specifically moved everything around and found a perfect place for this song once he heard it, because he knew exactly where he wanted it. And it's like stuff like that. It's like, man, and just there's such a great variety of music, and it all just flows together in such a wonderful way. But I mean, I think, music goes so underappreciated nowadays in the medium, but I felt this way with the first game, that the music really helped define Death Stranding as an experience. And I feel that's, tenfold here in Death Stranding 2.
And this is also not exactly us even going like, oh, look at the needle drops. Like, something like the Mario Brothers movie came out a couple years ago, and it has a bunch of needle drops, and it's an enjoyable flick or whatever, but they don't necessarily feel intentful. And that's not something that I can say about Death Stranding. Like, every single one seems specifically handpicked to tone set, to even build towards the themes and other things, and there's so many in Death Stranding too.
There really are, and it really does make the experience. And in addition to audio, just the audio design of the environment and all these different sounds for all these unique things, even like the little DHV Magellan theme.
Oh yeah,
like I'm just
it's burned
you have
into
a lot
my
of stuff. Yeah, man,
I hear
it's
it in
like
my dreams.
All the codec stuff. It's just all this audio design stuff is incredible, and of course, I mean the performances. I mean, my God,
Dude,
man,
like
just incredible.
Like the first game already had one of probably the best like mocap performances I've ever seen in one of these AAA high fidelity games. The stuff at the very end of the first Death Stranding, they were such emotional moments that it actually got me teary-eyed. And what's amazing is that I'm not like just sitting and crying at video games all day or anything. And even if I absolutely adore a story or emotionally invested, it doesn't necessarily mean it'll wring some tears out of me. But like the last few hours of Death Stranding 2 touched me in such special places in my soul that like I cried multiple times during that final stretch. There's just so much beautiful stuff, or even things that if you're like a true fan of video games, I feel like there's just moments in this game where things like the mechanics, the graphics, the music, just everything just comes together in a beautiful swan song you don't really get to see all the time. Especially presented in such a... Like, you can look at how this game's presented on every small level and go, yeah, that is a Hideo Kojima game. Like,
Yeah.
can you look at Assassin's Creed Shadow and tell me exactly what director, character designer, or composers could have even theoretically worked on it?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know, man.
That's us hopping on Moby Games. And that's not like a dig at like a well-crafted product. Because, they did the research into the historical accuracies and stuff and have a lot they've built up on. But Death Stranding 2 is like an auteur work that you're just not going to get anywhere else. It's not something that Kojima has taken from anywhere else. This is just all him unabashedly, just perfectly fine-tuned. And it feels like you're going on this journey, not just with Sam and all these characters, but it really does feel like a wild ride that Kojima's sitting shotgun with you the whole time.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's like everything. I think the way that you had said to me the other day that like you felt like you were really there in the game. And I think that's a great way to put it. Like, just the way that everything is framed, you just get so invested in the game. And with, you have this personal crafted selection of tracks. You have just these little, not the fourth wall breaks here and there, the writing, just this stuff just all comes together, and it really just makes you feel like you're there, and you care so much about this world and these characters, especially after you've played the first game.
And I've heard some people say you can just jump straight into Death Stranding 2. And I'd say from a gameplay perspective, yeah, sure, but really just you have to do yourself a favor, and if you appreciate video games as an artistic medium whatsoever, you really need to play Death Stranding 1 and 2 with like an open mind and an open heart, really. Cuz I can get why Death Stranding 1 especially put off so many people, but I also think it just does things that no other video games really even properly attempted. It's so wholly unique, and you can't find anything like this anywhere else.
No, exactly. It is raw, unabashedly true creative vision, and I completely agree. I mean, how many times a year, how many times this decade have we really gotten a game that has just been uncompromised creative vision? I mean, I really don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we've had a lot of great games that have had incredible creative vision, but how many games have had no compromise to make that happen? And it's like that's what makes, like we've said, that's what makes this game so special. It really is. I mean, there's no telling how many games like this, again, no telling how many more games Kojima's going to make, right? We have Fizzant, we have OD that are set to be released hopefully by the end of the decade. And beyond that, it's like, who knows what's going to be after that? Who knows if we'll get Death Stranding 3? Who knows if there will be any more games after that? I mean, we don't know. So I'm really thankful that we got this game, and I'm glad that we get to celebrate it, because it is something really worth celebrating.
And another thing I kind of thought about is you mentioned it earlier, like I would have been perfectly fine if Death Stranding never got a sequel, but now that it's actually in my hands, just I couldn't imagine Death Stranding not having a sequel now.
No, no.
Because I can still honestly sit there and be like, oh yeah, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are practically two different games in many respects of the word. But this, man, I wouldn't even go as far to say is that even Kingdom Hearts quite has this level of just smoothness. And it's like a pretty continuous plot. It's also a topic that I feel like we can touch on a little bit, is like, we have this uncompromised creative vision, but this is one of the most polished AAA releases that we've seen in a while.
I mean, yeah, I would say in the last 10 years, it's one of the most polished AAA games I've seen.
Like, there's a couple of rough
I
edges,
had no bugs.
but
None.
pretty much nothing that would make me more than just like blink. It's like a mosquito hitting your windshield. Like, there's just a couple times where I was just holding like the right D-pad button to open up the weapon menu, and I had to let go and just re-hit, just because of, every game has different input buffering and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that's really the only
it's crazy
that I would probably openly complain about. And it's just like, just every game kind of has their slight quirks and feel. But like, the shooting feels great. The driving does feel a lot smoother, even though I didn't really have that many complaints about it in the first game. But man, it's just like, I'm not falling through the world or anything. And you're also getting just crazy detail. Like, look at how perfect the inverse kinematics of like Sam's feet lining up with all the terrain perfect. Or even how impressive.
which was not the case in the first game.
Yeah, there's a, that technology can be tricky sometimes, but I think they really just gosh, I just keep trying to go to a new idea, but we've talked about some of it, but just everything in this game, man. It's just really hard to pick what to gush about, and just gosh. Also, yes, this is something I was going to mention earlier. I think the delivery variety is so good this time. Because sometimes in the first game, there's only like so many delivery types. But this one, I feel like there's times where the game does try to make you go out of your comfort zone and experiment with a few different things. Like some missions just feel like they're asking for a truck. But then there's others that feel like maybe you shouldn't go into this guns blazing even if you totally want to. Like that's when I fell in love with the blood boomerang and how silent and just useful it could be, especially under the cover of nightfall sneaking into a camp. Cause that one mission where you gotta like retrieve some stolen bombs, dude. I rolled in the first time just like, oh, I'm invincible with like this shotgun that I got from Gen Hoshino. I mean, that was like mostly the case. I could run in and wreak some havoc, but you know, the problem when transporting a bomb comes less with whether you can defend yourself and less what if someone runs up behind you and just pokes you and you explode? And I think having that bit of mission variety, while you can brute force things, much like you can in some RPGs, I do think it wants you to experiment. Because, you know, we've talked about just how much this game has and the play styling. And, dude, like, I'm wanting to go back right now, even though us at Final Weapon have, you know, some aspirations we're working towards, along with just games never stop coming out, man. But I just want to go back because it just feels like there's so much to just play with. And I wouldn't describe this game as like a sandbox like a Zelda, much like I said earlier. But it feels very mechanically deep, almost like a RPG with like the sim elements I mentioned earlier. Because, you know, guns have different levels, different modes. But then there's like the gloves that can like grab things, the climbing gloves. And what really shocked me, I wasn't expecting just something that's this much of a game changer, and they just give it to you with little to no fanfare. The EX capture grenade, where you can basically play Pokemon with big BTs.
It's sick, man.
And, dude, how have we gone this long talking about the cars and not gone, oh yeah, you can like put like spiked tires on it with all these guns. You can armor around them and everything. And dude, there's just so many ways to tackle things that I just still can't get over it. Cause there's a part of me that was gonna like record more of, you know, my journey with Death Stranding, but I already know I'm probably gonna replay it within the next year. I just need to sit down and really deep dive these games. And it's crazy how Death Stranding pretty much invented a new genre, a new style of open world. And then Death Stranding 2 just continues that in such a refined way. And it doesn't feel like Death Stranding 1 was even sanded down to be more palatable, in my opinion. Which is something I've worried about before release, and that I've seen some people kind of haphazardly throw around online just because of the extra action elements. And a little bit of quality of life with like the Magellan. But I'm glad that we have creators like Kojima that still strike out to this day to make something that not everyone's going to be able to swallow easy. Because what was so interesting about Metal Gear Solid was its focus on stealth and how that was antithetical to what games were during like the era of Metal Gear and Metal Gear Solid. And I think Death Stranding is that exact same thing. Kojima didn't have to strike out and necessarily reinvent the wheel and make an IP so radically different from what he'd previously worked on, but he did. And here we are with what I really truly consider the best game of 2025, and if I knew what the rest of the 2020s was holding, I would honestly say I'm gonna say it. This is a contender for Game of the Decade.
Oh,
like
no,
even with
undoubtedly.
only half of it gone. This is like Game of the Decade material right here. And I feel like anyone who complains about the creative bankruptness in the AAA space, especially in gaming, should really turn their head and look at Death Stranding 2. Because it really gives you about anything you could want from a high production value product and so much more.
100%. And it's like, we're in an era right now that's dominated with remakes, remasters, and just brainless sequels, as we'll call them, right? Just sequels because the first game sold well. And you could argue that for Death Stranding. Death Stranding 1 sold well enough that we got a sequel, but this sequel is not the same game. It is fully transformed, and we don't see that all the time. We really don't. I mean, you think about the games that, for example, don't get me wrong, like I'm looking forward to some of these, but like one of the biggest games of next year that people keep talking about is the Tomb Raider remake, right? Like I'm excited for it. I love Tomb Raider, don't get me wrong, but it's like it's a remake, and I feel like every year people get super excited for remake, remake, remake. And again, we're all guilty here. Like Resident Evil 4 was my game of the year for 2023, right? We're all guilty here. But it's like, and that's, we can have a whole conversation on what a good remake is and what a bad remake is. RE4 was an incredible remake that elevated the original, but beyond that, we're in an era right now where originality is so hard to find, as we've talked about countless times today in this video. And it's just so great that Death Stranding 2 exists, and you should be supporting it if you're tired of just the overall industry right now and just what almost ultimately feels like recycling the same ideas over and over again just to generate profit, right? I mean, that's what it feels like at a certain point. We get the same games. I mean, you can't help but feel when you watch presentations that you just see the same genre of game over and over and over again with a reskin. And it's like, oh my gosh, like at this point, like what games stand out? We have a selection of games every year that stand out from the rest, but especially Death Stranding 2, it's, as Payne said, it's its own unique thing. It's its own genre. I mean, it really is. The Strand type game is a real thing. And the way that Kojima was able to innovate upon the first game and fully put out this one, and it surpassed my expectations and well beyond that. And I completely agree. It is 100% a contender for game of the generation, for game of the decade, and I'm very excited to see what the future holds for it, especially because it seems like we have an imminent PC release for it, considering it got rated.
Yeah, already been having people ask if it's on anything other than PlayStation.
And I'll tell you, man, bring them to Switch too. Bring both the games to Switch too. I'd do many things for that.
Yes, I mean we have Death Stranding on what, iPhone 13 or whatever, and the Switch 2's better than a PS4 Pro, which is how I originally played like the first chunk of the game, and that was great. I think they could do an excellent Switch 2 port of 1, and honestly, since we're definitely getting something demanding like FF7 Rebirth on the Switch 2, there's no way they couldn't manage to get Death Stranding 2 on it.
No, I mean, that's the beauty of Decima, man. It's like, Decima is genuinely one of the most impressive engines I've ever seen. Death Stranding 2 visually is unbelievable. Probably the best looking game I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I mean, it will run. It will run on that console. I guarantee you. I mean, I remember booting up Death Stranding on my PC back in the day. And at the time, Death Stranding was like, wow, this game looks unbelievable. And the crazy thing is I had a 2060 Super at that time in 2020. And that game ran at 4K 60 with DLSS on my 2060 Super. I mean, that was crazy at the time to me. And I fully believe that Death Stranding 2 will be the same thing. It's going to run phenomenally on lower hardware.
Because, like, man, even on, like, I ran the game off of a vanilla PS5. And that game I'm sure if I looked at the Digital Foundry review, I could get some more concrete numbers. But there's, like, practically no drops from 60. And that game is always a high resolution, like, 2K. And then
I mean, I played it on my base PS5
models,
too,
bro.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's some of the best, like, facial scan mocap I've ever seen. And then every landscape, like you mentioned what I said to you in messages, like, dude, it just feels like you're in this other universe sometimes.
It really does. It really does. And, I think for us at Final Weapon, that's really all you can ask when we look at Game of the Year. We said at the beginning, a game that pushes forward and innovates. And at the end of the day, Being able to transport into one of these worlds is all you can ask for from a game. And Death Stranding 2 did exactly that, and for that reason, it's our game of the year for 2025. With that being said, thank you all so much for tuning into our game of the year discussion. We're really excited about Death Stranding 2, and we'll hopefully have more content on it in the future, as well as for the first Death Stranding. But be sure to let us know down below what your game of the year was. If you played Death Stranding 2, what your thoughts on it were.
Also, please donate to my roads. I'm a very poor soul who doesn't have highways across all of Australia, and I need your help. You see, Noah hasn't accepted my bridge link yet.
That's exactly right. Be sure to donate those materials because, oh my God, Payne needs them and he won't stop asking me for them, and I don't have them. But with that being said, thank y'all so much for listening, and be sure to stay tuned for a very exciting 2026.